Okay, hi guys. My name's Lauren, and we are going to be talking about, if it won't work, competitor research. So before I get into it, I'm just gonna give you guys a little bit of an introduction about myself. So if you're wondering why I can't understand anything I'm saying, it's because I'm from England, not the good part, but I moved to Israel in 2009. I joined Wix in 2020, so just over 2 years ago now. And I was also the first ever student to join the UX Writers, which was really, really great. And I went full time upon my graduation last summer. So I'm a UX writer for the Wix mobile apps and specifically for the growth team. And the growth team, obviously, biasly, is the best team. But it's really cool. It's a really unique team because I get to write content for all of the 5 Wix apps that we have. So I'm going to give you a really short overview of what the apps are because I will be referring to them throughout the presentation. So first we have the Wix Owner app on the left, and this is like our management type of app. So it's for people that have Wix websites or they want to create a Wix website through the app. They can do so here. And basically they can manage all aspects of their site. So they have the dashboard, they can create things, they can add things, they have their analytics. And then we have what we call the members app. So this is for users of users. Basically, they join sites on the app, they become a member of those sites, and they can interact with those sites from the apps. So we have the Spaces by Wix app, which is the blue one. This is like the general app for all types of users, for all types of websites. We have the Fit by Wix app, which is specifically for fitness businesses and their clients. We have the Dine by Wix app, which is like Wolt, but way better. So it's basically kind of like a food ordering app. And then lastly, we have the Branded app, which is Wix's premium white label app. So this is for users who want to create their own app to list in the App Store and Google Play. They can do so through Wix. So I'm going to give you a short overview of what I'll be talking about in the presentation. So first, I'll talk about what is even competitor research. Why is it important? How do we define our competitors? How do you conduct your own research? And lastly, when do we even follow competitors? So first of all, what is it? In a nutshell, competitive research involves identifying our competitors and evaluating the strengths and weaknesses of their products and services. But it's also more than that. It also lets us understand how competitors are positioning themselves and how they're speaking to their audience. Oh, sorry. So it's also the process of analyzing competitors' content strategies in a structured way. We should be looking for the most common language and design patterns in order to learn where we stand compared to our competitors. And by doing this, we're able to uncover potential competitors' strong content and weak spots, and therefore we can better identify our own voice in relation to others. So why do we do it? First of all, everyone has competitors, and knowing who they are is the first step in improving your products. So no matter how young your company is or how unique to the market it may be, everyone will have a competitor in one form or another. There might be direct or indirect competitors, which I'll explain about shortly, but everyone is going to have one and they'll be in the same market as you. Next, we do it because obviously knowledge is power, and it lets us know, like I said, our competitors' strengths and weaknesses. As obvious as it is, the more information you have about your competitors, the more aware of not only what they'll be doing in general, but what their strengths and weaknesses are and how you can benefit from that. And when you begin to pick up on the things, what they're doing well and not so well, you'll eventually be able to apply those takeaways to your products. Third, we do it to stay on top of trends that are always evolving, like terminology, involving linguistics, style guides, accessibility, and so on. Research is good for specific research, such as helping you name a certain item, but it's also good for keeping you in the know of what's being done in the industry. So things like, are most websites using capital case or sentence case for their titles, or are other websites using exclamation marks in their success screens? These are all things that research can help us with. And lastly, it helps us notice gaps in our own products, and it helps inspire us. So when you're researching, you obviously have to use someone's product like a new user. And the more research you'll do, the more you'll start to notice gaps in your product and pick up on the things that could use improvement. And it also gives us inspiration for new ways of doing things. So something that's really good to remember when researching is Jacob's law, and this was coined by Jacob Nielsen. So he's really big in the usability world, and he's the co-founder of a user interface and user experience consulting firm. So he said that users spend most of their time on other sites. This means that users prefer your site to work the same way as all the other sites they already know. So this obviously won't be applicable for everything that you write for, but it's really good to remember when you want to research a well-known feature. Because if your company does something different to the socially accepted thing, the users are going to think that your website and company is the one in the wrong, and they'll probably begin to trust your company less. So this is taken from a blog written by Sasha Holmes, and he gave us an example just how relevant this law is to our everyday website activity. So he said an example of this would be your header navigation. Most websites you visit would have the company logo in the top left-hand corner. The logo would probably be clickable and linked to the homepage if a user should click it. So as you can see, this is obviously relevant for Wix. We have the logo in the top left-hand corner, and when clicking it, it takes our users to the homepage. So now we know what competitor research is and why it's important. Let's move on to looking at how we define our competitors. So there are two groups, and it's really important that you know both of them. We have the direct competitors, and these are basically businesses that offer the same things that your business does. So the same products, the same features, the same benefits. And just to give you an example, I'll give you the Wix app's direct competitors. So we have the Shopify app, Squarespace app, the WordPress app, but these are already known competitors of Wix. But ones that we have that are specific for the apps are things like Mighty Network and Band, and these are both community-based apps. And we also have the MindBody app, which is a fitness app. Indirect competitors, on the other hand, are kind of the world that your product exists in. So users will spend most of their time on these type of platforms, and so they're used to a specific type of terminology. So again, for the Wix apps, our indirect competitors would be social media apps. So Facebook, Instagram, anything Mark Zuckerberg owns, basically, Pinterest, Twitter. So they don't offer the same things like the Wix apps, like website creation and management, but they offer similar things like event creation, group creation, and they all have something that they share, which is invite flows or other things like that, what are always going to be native to apps. So I'm going to show you just an example of indirect research that me and my team did. So this is a rate the app feature, and we added it both to the Wix owner app and the Spaces by Wix app. The way it works is that when users press one of the positive response, so the thumbs up or the smiley face on the right, the native app rater would appear, asking users to rate the app also on the App Store. So when my team came to me and asked me to begin wording this feature, I really had no idea where to begin. I didn't know how conversational we should be, what type of UI or UX would be best for it. So I took to researching. So for this type of research, I simply Google searched rate the app pop-ups, and hundreds of images from different apps appeared. So as you can see, the phrasing across multiple apps are really similar. They all consist of a question, usually asking, how are users enjoying the app, or are they liking the app? But as you can see, the UX and the design is a lot different. Some use stars, some use the slider, some used emoji, words. It really was different throughout all the apps. So this is what I ended up doing for the apps. So from the research I saw that the app structured the feature with the question instead of a statement like, give us a rating. The questions all focus around asking users if they were actually liking the app. And I like this approach for a few reasons. First, the feature is really annoying. It pops up, it's in the way of what we want to do, and it's something we wouldn't typically search for freely. So I thought that actually asking users how they're enjoying it instead of just rate the app for us showed that we really cared about their experience. Second, my intention here was to really understand how users were finding the navigation and the features of the apps. So the owner's app version on the left was implemented a few months after we released the app. And so we genuinely wanted to know if users were really liking it or not. So I spoke to my product manager and we kind of agreed on doing something different from the research I showed her. So as I said, most of the research showed the UX was stars or words and things like that, but I kind of took focus away from what we wanted to do here. We wanted to be as straight to the point as possible for this feature. And so I decided maybe let's do a thumbs up and a thumbs down icon, as these are both really easy to understand from first glance. as users would just apply this to being something good and something bad. And so we thought this would be the best direction to go for. We also thought that using stars or emojis or word would take up a lot more room, and it would also take a few more seconds for our users to understand. For the Spaces app, however, we did something different. We implemented the feature because we really wanted to understand if users were having issues or any problems with the app as well. So I decided to follow the competitor research because I kind of liked how they showed the emojis with the words, because it gave really specific answers which would help us understanding what issues our users were facing. We also designed it that if users click the first two options, the feedback form you can see on the right would appear, and that way we could get even more information from our users. So another example of research that I did, and this is just kind of a different one, which shows just how relevant research should be in our day-to-day content. So I was going through the app one day, I was QAing it, and I was going through the login flow, and I came across the placeholder we use for the login email. And something stuck out to me, just a little bit weird, and something I wanted to research. So I thought using a really generic male name as an example seemed like really old practice. And also the term that we used, Wix, as the email domain wasn't correct for every user that was logging in. Some use Gmail, some use Yahoo. So I took to researching. So this is some examples that I found from other websites. So as you can see, most of them use the word example, which I liked, because then we could drop the EG that we were using in the beginning of our placeholder. I also like the way that they used mail, as you can see on the bottom left, as the email domain, because this was applicable for every type of user, and also every user would understand what this meant. So this is what I changed it to, and for anyone that noticed, it is a direct copy of one of the examples I showed, but I think it's way more straightforward, way shorter than what was there before, and it just goes to show that even placeholders, which, you know, very minimal text, sometimes also requires research. So now I know the what and the why of competitor research. Let's look at how do we actually do it. So before I begin, this is just an example of how I specifically do it in my team. Every company and every team will have their own process, but ideally research should be the first step and in collaboration with other stakeholders. So first we have the kickoff, and at Wix, we always have a kickoff with the product manager, the writer, designer, the dev, whoever basically is needed. So for here, the PM, the product manager, would explain the goal of the feature, its KPIs, target audience, and whatever else is needed. Next, you want to identify what type of research this requires. So before you start, you need to know if your competitors are direct or the indirect ones. And once you know, then you can start going through the relevant flows. For my example, in my team, this is when I would start downloading all of the relevant apps. Now you want to go through that flow as a new user. And when you do so, you want to document everything and not rely on memory from past experience. You want to screenshot along the way, take videos, screen record, but most importantly, you want to know and notice the pain points that you feel, so you know not to copy those for your products. And sometimes, like I said before, simply Googling images is enough research, but it basically just depends on what you want to research. Now it's time for collaboration with your designers and PM. So both your designers and your product managers should also be doing their own research, but you should be sharing your research with each other along the way to gain more information from other points of view. And when you've done all that, now you can begin to document it. So depending on what works for you, either create a doc that everyone on your team shares or create separate ones for both content and design. But no matter what you do, there should be a doc with all of your research and images. And when you do that, you begin to analyze. So you want to look out for what sticks out, what words do they all use, what's the most common design pattern. But this is when you should be getting a general idea of what the most common practices are. And lastly, it's time for conclusions. So you want to see what do you like best from the research, what do you think your users would understand, and what works best for your KPIs. So all's well, you've decided how you want to move forward, what you want and don't want to take from the research you saw, but then your product manager wants you to copy another competitor's version. We've all been there. So sometimes a product manager will want us to identically follow an existing feature from a competitor. So what do we do when we suspect this isn't right for our product? So how do we justify our case? So it's really important to remember that just because a company is doing something doesn't mean it's right, but it doesn't mean it's right for your product either. We all have our own goals. We all have our users, our target audiences. No products are ever going to be exactly alike. So how do we actually solve it? First, obviously listen to your product manager and ask them to explain why they think following someone else's feature would be beneficial to you as a company and your product. So hopefully they'll have an actual justified reason and not just because it looks good, but obviously always take the time to listen to your team. Next, you want to explain your concerns as a writer and also a user. And when you explain your concerns, you want to base your arguments based on the research that you saw. But nonetheless, you're the content person. You know the content best, and you know the terms that your users are used to in your products up until this point. Third, always suggest A/B testing. A/B testing is so beneficial when it comes to content. And if your team has the ability to do 2 versions at once, always try doing that so the data can speak for itself. And lastly, come up with a version that all sides agree on. If your team is really adamant to follow a competitor, create a version that includes details from the competitor's version, but it has your own tweaks to suit your product. So this is an example of something that my team did where we did follow an indirect competitor and it didn't go to plan at all. So this is the mobile invite banner feature, mouthful. So site owners who use the Wix owner app can add this banner to the mobile version of their site. And by mobile version, I mean your mobile web on your phone or your tablet. So the banner basically encourages their site visitors to download the Wix member app to interact with their site from there. So we started on the left with the top banner, as we call it, and this is something we already had, and we wanted to test something against it. So my product manager wanted to basically copy the behavior from the Reddit banner on the far right, as he thought it would be really nice to give our users the option of viewing the site from the app or staying where they were. So I wasn't completely for this idea, but I didn't really strongly object to it either. And I did agree that giving our users the option of both things was quite nice. But whilst the idea was nice, the banner itself really wasn't user-friendly, as the site basically became disabled until users interacted with one of the 2 options. So whilst it seemed like we were giving our users the freedom to choose, it was actually a really aggressive banner. And it performed so badly, both on the owner side who weren't adding it to their mobile sites, and also the visitors who weren't interacting with it. So we decided to change directions completely. So what did we do? We carried on researching. We went through loads of other websites, loads of other apps, and saw what they were doing. So we saw that the most common pattern and content was the pop-up bottom banner, as we call it. And it basically says that users will get the better experience from their app. So with my really good UX design data, after more research, this is what we ended up doing. We saw that this was the most popular design and content, and it seemed like this research worked really well because we had a 106% increase of click rate compared to the top banner, and 130% of users who joined the apps on the from this banner also compared to the top banner. So to finish up, let's talk about when we actually should and shouldn't be following our competitors. So as a general rule, there isn't a right or wrong answer of when we should be following a competitor and when we shouldn't be. It completely depends on your users and where this feature exists in your product. Every feature is unique, no matter how similar it is to another competitor's feature. But I know that's not so helpful. So let's look at some questions you can ask yourself, which will hopefully give you an indication to whether you should be following someone or shouldn't be. So first, you want to ask yourself, is this a feature that would appear on sites that our users use daily? Is it something that already be familiar with, which, as we saw, is Jacob's law? If the answer is yes, it may be best that you do follow a competitor here. Next, does their design and content make sense for our features and our KPIs? If the answer is no, you can definitely take inspiration from your competitors, but you need to make sure that you're writing something that's already in line with your product. And third, would our users understand the words being used? Does it match our tone and voice? The most important things for your users is consistency. You need to make sure you're writing something that's in the same tone and voice as the rest of your products. And most importantly, actually using words that your users will understand. So to sum up, let's look at the key things from this presentation that you should take away. So first of all, obviously everyone should be researching and researching as many features as you can. It obviously takes time, but it will only strengthen your product in the long run. Second, get to know your competitors, both the direct and indirect ones. And even if you've been in a company for years, there's always going to be more companies emerging in the industry. Third, make your own research process. It definitely isn't the most exciting thing when it comes to writing, but it's really important you actually enjoy doing it. So come up with a process that just works for you. And last, don't be afraid to go against the norm, as cliche as it is, but trust your gut. You'll know when following a competitor is the right thing for your product and when it's not. And that's about it. So. There will be a Q&A session at the end as well, but yeah, we do have some time. But wait. Then everyone needs to hear.
Hi, Zoom. First of all, that was great. Thank you so much. I needed that. Have you ever come across in your work the feature that you cited, for example, the review, how are we doing?
Right, yeah.
You knew what it was called. You knew how to search for it.
Yeah.
It exists in other apps in a parallel fashion. Have you ever had to find something that didn't necessarily have a corollary, like that didn't exist in other industries and you didn't know what to call it, you didn't know how to trigger it?
I mean, so it's not the same, but the mobile invite banner I showed that performed really badly, we didn't know what that's actually called, because I don't know if anyone would know what that's called, but we didn't. We just knew it from what we were using internally. So it's kind of a guessing game, and it just takes, you know, it's me, my product manager, my designer, literally just took what we eventually came up with, the mobile invite banner. But I think it's something that's kind of known because there's only so much you can call it, and there's only so much guessing game that works around it. So it sometimes just takes to Googling what you think it is called, and then you'll find a rabbit hole of things, usually on Reddit. So like, funnily enough, there's always kind of threads that go on about certain features in the apps, but usually there are way more technical people out there that know the actual name for things. But usually 99% of the time it's a guessing game. Yeah.
Hi. Question for you, obviously. So every time you do research on a feature, are you also testing that feature to make sure that it is working better than what it was doing before?
Yeah, 9 times out of 10, especially my team. So because of the growth team, we really want to see what's working for our users. And I mean, that kind of goes without saying, but because we're really focused on bringing in as many users to the apps as possible, it's really important that we keep track of how those features are performing. So I would say probably 9.5 times out of 10, we will always A/B test something. So we did about, in the 2 and a bit years I've been at Wix, I think that was the 3rd version of that mobile invite banner that we did. And there were way more before I came. So yeah, we always try to test as much as possible. It's very important.
So this is actually more to go off of the testing that you just mentioned, and you said this is the 3rd version. Do you keep track of the previous versions that you've done, and how do you do that? How do you document the previous versions?
Yeah, we always do. Everything is complete, like any docs, like that's our most sacred like Bible. So that's down to our analysts. Basically, they always keep I mean, we personally just do it in kind of like spreadsheets, and they put all of the data. We can kind of see every version, and then the categories will be like how many people interacted with the banner, how many people downloaded it from the banner, how many people clicked X, all of the different outcomes that could come from that. We always keep track of, and the percentage, and basically see if there's an increase and decrease. And that's just a really easy way of viewing it all together.
And so basically, in terms of like documenting that performance, do you then refer back to it when you're ideating and researching challenging to see if you are repeating the same practices you did in like 7, 8 iterations past.
Yeah,
Is that also
always,
part of
yeah.
it?
I mean, the good thing about the apps is that we're fairly new. I mean, we've we've been up and running for I think about 4 or 5 years now. So there's only so many things we can kind of repeat. So most of the things we already know, just the back of our heads of what we've done and what we want to do. But yes, everything is always there, and we always refer to what we've done before, so we know not to repeat those same mistakes.
All the way in the back. Hi, can you hear me? Okay.
Yeah.
Great talk. Quick question. It seems like it's a really solitary process. Like you're doing all this research. How do you tell other writers on your team about the research you've already done so they don't repeat that?
So I'm the only writer on my team, so there's no issue. But
Like in the guild, like you have a bunch of other UX writers.
I can only imagine. I mean, obviously, I work with a lot of the other writers from the different companies and teams we have throughout Wix. So if ever there's no real kind of crossover with the identical features we want to do, but if any writer kind of comes to me and says we're going to do this, I know that you've done something like it in the past. I'll make sure just to really give them a brief summary of the results that came from the previous test or the previous feature, and I'll basically tell them this worked really great and this really didn't. And from there, they can kind of adapt it. But again, it's kind of tricky because I'm the only writer, but there are two other writers in my company. But it's just open communication. We just give them, the docs and the sheets that our analysts write up with the results. And they're usually kind of easy to understand because we're only looking for increase and decrease as the main goal. But from there, I just basically fill them in on what the results were, and they can, yeah.
Thank you.
Hi, Lauren. I have one
Sorry,
question.
hold on. Really, I just want to say, I think that was a really good question. And I think it's not just a question from Lauren, because it's really a question about how are we sharing information across our different product teams when it comes to the research that we do. I don't think we have a great solution in place right now. And I think we're working to try and create a strong infrastructure there so that we can be sharing what we believe are best practices and working together to reach like defined best practices for different types of features, for different components, for different interactive features. But I think it's a really big challenge. It's especially a big challenge for big teams. And we are big teams that work on all different kinds of products. So it's something that I think we're working on.
One more question. No, done. Okay, so I think, oh, yeah.
Hey.
Hi.
Have you considered doing any qualitative research or getting any qualitative feedback on those, either the competitor or your copy, just like show it to users and ask them?
As in like user research?
Mhm.
Yeah, so is one of you going to speak about that? Laura's going to speak about that next. But as a whole, yes, it's something that we try to do as much as possible. And especially for really tricky features, these are always the best thing to research about with your users, just to literally understand if they are understanding it or not. But yeah, that's something we definitely try to strive for, and definitely something we could all be better at and do as much as possible. But 100% every feature I just showed here as an example would like definitely be something I would do user research about and ask them how they were finding it, how they if they understood it. Yeah, really important.
Thanks.